It's great to be here. So, today on Sportsbook Confidential, who am I and what am I doing here? We'll look at some of the games this weekend for betting opportunities and talk about what's in store for the upcoming season. So let's get started. Happy to have you with me. Hello, everybody. My name's John Sullivan. I got my Bills gear on, and you're watching the premiere episode of Sportsbook Confidential. On this program, I'll be joining you weekly to discuss both the news and strategies involved in sports betting and fantasy sports. Before we jump into this week's games, I'd like to talk a little bit about how I got here today with you. So, as you may know, sports betting's been in the news lately. We've had legal expansion growing across the country. For example, they have live sports betting in New Jersey now. And it will be in our backyard very soon here in the Finger Lakes. I had actually hoped by the time I started this podcast that we would have live betting at Del Lago nearby. That hasn't happened yet, but I expect it will soon. So in anticipation of this, I approached the great people at FingerLakes1.com to launch a new sports program to help bettors avoid the pitfalls that cost them money, so to give people a fighting chance. So if you're thinking about sports betting, or you like to do it but you haven't had much success, or you had some success and you'd like to have more, I think you've come to the right place. There will be info that will help both new and experienced bettors, and that is somewhat my mission statement. I'm trying to do something that is considered very challenging in this space. I'm trying to provide content that will actually help people at betting and help people at fantasy sports. I believe it's possible to help others improve, and without giving away any significant advantage you might appear to have on a betting market. So if you're just here looking for picks, you'll get that too. I don't recommend just betting games because somebody else tells you to. The part of this whole process is making informed decisions. But however, all of my wagers will be available to you as we wind up the show here today. So before we actually get into the games and the bets or the plays, let's talk a little bit about why people bet on sports. And this all ties together. So stick with me for a second, and you'll see how this all kind of blends together. And what are reasons people bet on sports? A first one is entertainment. People like to have money riding on a game. It makes it more exciting for them. It's what you would call, that's a definition of an action junkie, somebody that likes to bet on sports. And there's nothing wrong with having a make it interesting wager, on a game. And it's certainly fun to watch sports when you have money riding on it. But that's just a component. Second is profit. This is very important. Betting is a chance to win some money. Some bets give you a better chance to win money than other bets, and some bets give you a chance to win more money than other bets. And what type of bet you make and where you go should always have a profit motive, in my opinion, especially if you're trying to be profitable, win money betting sports. But that is a whole nother component. We'll talk about what bets and why and how much later down the road. And the one area that most people don't really talk about is the psychological aspect of betting. People want to be right about things. This is just a basic tenet of life. People want to think they're smart and they want to be right about things. And betting on sports is a quantitative way to measure my correctness. It's, you have tangible money in your hand for winning a sports bet, and you could say, I was right, my analysis was right. And it validates, your intuitions and your biases. Now, that is a motivation to wager. It's not really what we're shooting for, but I just wanted to point out that this has a lot. It's a driving factor. A lot of the fantasy people that play fantasy sports full time have a driving desire to be right. They're micromanagers. They pore over numbers, and they spend hours and hours looking for the numbers to tell them something about how to play the game. and it's their desire to be right about things and what gets them to the top of the leaderboard or the top of the prize pool. Now, as I said before, there's nothing wrong for betting for any of those reasons. However, to be a successful bettor, you have to have a profit motive. Even if you're betting just for fun, the mission has to be profitable. Why? Because if you're betting with profit in mind, if you're just spending entertainment dollars and you're not really worried about how much you make betting, your money will last longer. It'll make your bankroll longer and stronger, as we like to say. So if you're profitable, you'll be able to make larger bets. You'll be able to make more bets if you find more advantageous plays to make. And as we go along through this program down the road, we're going to talk about all kinds of different betting lessons and things we can do to improve the way we bet, and how we approach it mentally is a big part of all of this. Having a profit motive will also make you selective in choosing your bets, how often you bet. That's just one lesson. You will pay attention to the size of your bet and adjust your number constantly. That's your bankroll. And bankroll is a word you're going to hear me say a lot. And if you're new to betting, your bankroll is the probably 50%, if not more, of the key to being a successful sports bettor is how you manage your bankroll. And if you're watching right now saying, what's a bankroll? Well, the answer is the total amount of money that you have committed to your sports betting endeavors. It's not how much you have in play. It's not how much do I have in my hand right now. It's the amount of money you have, the amount of resources you have set aside for sports betting. So you know that you can access that if you need it, but it doesn't mean it has to be right in front of you. You don't carry it around with you. So, as I said, bankroll management is so important. Being selective and being with a profit motive is equally as important. Those are the two basic tenets of sports betting that we're going to grow off of as we go into future episodes. So to wrap it up into 3 simple steps here, I'd like you to take away the following if you want to be successful at sports betting. Go into sports betting with a profit motive. I said that many times already. Be informed and selective when making bets. And 3, manage your bankroll constantly. And having both the will and the discipline in sports betting is really the key. And I've learned this the hard way. I've been doing this for about 15 years and not betting just to have something riding on the game, not betting because you're bored. Having the will and the discipline to be selective, having the will and the discipline not to bet too much and not to bet too little, not to be scared to place a larger wager if you have, a perceived edge. So all of that will be paramount to your success. That whole discipline thing carries through to this day. I mean, it's just like being on a good diet or something like that. It's very important. You got to have that will and discipline. So let's get on to the weekend in football. So it's the beginning of the football season, and I do most of my wagering on the NFL. And I'll talk about college games here. I almost wore my Syracuse today, but I decided to go with the Bills because I'm trying to be optimistic in our first episode. But this week in college is really kind of a bad schedule. It's just there's a lot of big college programs playing small schools, and there's a lot of lines that are 30 points, 40-point favorites, and some that are so big that they don't even have a number on the board. So, for example, Syracuse is hosting Wagner College, which is an FCS school, and there's no line for that game right now. So I couldn't even give you an opinion on the game if, I wanted to. And I wouldn't recommend betting a game like that. There's too many variables, in my opinion. How long does the coach of the better team leave the starters in? And does he let the backups run up the score, or does he tell them to, run constantly to run out the clock. And just, I don't like games that have too many, unanswered questions. If you're worried about how much a third or fourth string player is going to play, you're probably wasting your time handicapping that game. So I'm really not going to give too many college plays this week. As a matter of fact, I'm only going to give one. The only game in college this weekend that has two top 20 teams facing each other is a Pac-12 matchup on Saturday night as USC is going to Stanford. And I believe the line at this point is Stanford -6. And Stanford is the higher-ranked team. They're 10th and USC 17th. Both teams are 1-0, and both teams are really kind of untested. I do like USC here if it gets to about 7.5, more than a touchdown. I feel like this is just a competitive game. USC has done really well. In college, it's a combination of two things. The team's personnel changes over very frequently because the players only have so much eligibility. But at the same time, if the programs are consistent and they've had the same coaches and the same systems for years, you can match up the teams pretty well, especially if they're in the same conference. And USC has done very well in Stanford. And I feel like if they're getting more than a touchdown, that they're a good play this weekend. I'm not counting that as an official play, but as far as college goes this week, that is the game that will probably have the most national interest, and it should be a competitive game, and I'll probably watch it myself, but I don't think I'm going to have any money on it. So on to the NFL. Week 1, we waited all this time, and here we are. Let's start with the local teams. The New York Football Giants are hosting the Jaguars. The Giants, of course, have Saquon Barkley as their new running back, and they have Eli back for at least a year or two more. I'm actually surprised that this game is only Jacksonville -3. Even though Jacksonville's on the road, you would think that the team that came that one quarter away from going to the Super Bowl and is pretty much all the way back from last year, roster-wise, would be favored more. But I do expect this game to be lower scoring. You have fantastic running games, and I feel like these coaches, a coach that's overmatched, like the Giants coaches, will coach what I call coach not to lose, and they will be conservative and play field position. And so I feel like that's going to be a low-scoring game. But the juice on the Jacksonville -3 is not the odds are not favorable to me, so I'm passing on that game. On to our New York Jets. They visit Detroit on Monday night, starting a rookie quarterback in his first game. And you can list off quarterbacks, the greatest quarterbacks of all time, you can even go further back, but in the last 30, 40 years, Montana, Elway, Marino, Steve Young, blah, blah, blah. Their first games were very tough experiences. Andrew Luck had a very, very difficult first year. This spells trouble for the team with the new quarterback. So the Lions are -6.5. I feel like that's a lot of points. I think it opened at 5.5, but I like the Lions at 5.5. However, they have a notorious ability to keep their games close. They can't seem to put anybody away throughout the entire Matt Stafford era. So I do not like wagering on this game, but I feel like if you do NFL Survivor picks, for those of you who know what that is, where you have to pick a team to win every week, I think like the Lions, this is their week for Survivor, so I would take them as a Survivor pick. But otherwise, I think I would just lay off that game. And finally, moving on to the last New York team, the one that actually plays in New York, the Buffalo Bills are traveling to Baltimore to face elite Joe Flacco and the Ravens. And many pundits are declaring Buffalo the worst worst team in the league. And they also have a rookie quarterback and a second-year quarterback that is known for throwing interceptions. And it doesn't look good for them to win this weekend. They do have a decent running game, but their offensive line pass protection is very poor. And I feel like they're in for a bad weekend. However, people often overreact to bigger lines, and I do not feel the Bills are going to win this game, but they could end up even covering in garbage time. Right now the line is at 7.5, and it's more than a touchdown. I'm going to watch this line, and if it does get to 10, I'm going to make that a play of mine and take the Bills at plus 10. I don't know if it will. The lines start to move on Fridays and all the way to Sunday morning when people start putting money on the games. I feel like Nathan Peterman is not a complete quarterback, but he's also being underrated because he had a 5-interception game last year. At the same time, I really do feel like the Ravens are going to win this game, and that's going to be everybody's regular survivor pick, the Ravens, because the Bills are supposed to be so bad. But I think the Bills can be competitive as far as the final score is concerned. They could be down by 14 and make it 7 late in the game. So I like the Bills if it gets to plus 10, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I probably won't wear my Bills gear next week, depending on what happens. So let's move on to other games that I like. I like Cincinnati is taking on the return of Andrew Luck in Indianapolis. They're taking on the Colts. So the Cincinnati has years of a solid defense. They have built a really good defensive system there. They're deep in running back, and they're playing the Colts, who have Andrew Luck back after a whole year off. Problem is his supporting cast is pretty slim. He's got T.Y. Hilton. He doesn't really have a lot at running back. Marlon Mack and Gore. I don't even think Gore's there anymore. Anyway, they really don't have the complementary players. So Cincinnati is actually getting points on the road. It's opened at plus 3, and I think it's down to plus 2.5. I actually think Cincy's going to win this game outright. I have them on the money line to win at plus 136, and I would take that at plus 130 or better. I would definitely take this Cincinnati side at plus 3 points or better. And then on Monday, the Rams are playing in the very last game of the week. They're going to the Oakland Raiders. And Oakland's having cash flow issues, and they traded Khalil Mack. And they have really not – they've got some good young wide receivers, and they really haven't put it together. Something I call the Peter Jennings syndrome. They can't just seem to get the ball to Amari Cooper. So I kind of look for a lopsided game here. The Rams have just so much talent on both sides of the ball. They have an amazing defense. They're young. They have a great running game. They have a great receiving game. I feel like the Raiders are just going to have trouble scoring points against this defense. So I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. I think if it's a blowout, that the Rams are going to give the ball to Todd Gurley in the second half, and they'll just try to ground game, manage the clock type of thing. So I'm looking at the under here on this game. I think it opened at 50, and I have the under at 49.5, and I would certainly take it at 49. I don't know if I would take it at less than that. We'll see what happens, but keep an eye on that line, and I think that's a surefire play for Monday night. And as a bonus, for those of you who do know me and have listened to my podcast before or followed my Twitter account, you know that I love Canadian football. I love the CFL. And in the CFL this week, I have to pick a game. The Tiger Cats they're going to Toronto to face the Toronto Argonauts. And this is the second week of a home and home. And last week, Hamilton beat them by 14. They scored like the last 24 points of the game. They covered the the -8 or whatever. So Even though Hamilton is on the road this week, they're minus 5.5-point favorites. I think these two teams are very evenly matched, and this is a huge overreaction. I'm not a trend better, but in home series where they play at one stadium one week and the same two teams play the next week, which happens a lot in the CFL, the series splits, the home series splits about 70% of the time. So not only do I think that these teams are evenly matched, but I also think the Argos can win this outright, and they pretty much need to if they want to stay in the playoff race. So I think they'll be better prepared, and I would like to take the Argos actually on the money line at plus 185, which is a very nice payday. But if you want to play it safe, take the Argos plus 5.5 points. So what I'd like to do now is just quickly review our picks for this week. And let me show them for you right now. We have the Bengals money line plus 136. And for those of you that don't know what money line means, that means to win outright. There's no points involved. There's no point spread. The Rams and the Raiders under 49.5 total points scored. We have the Toronto Argonauts, the double blue, to win outright at plus 185. And then, of course, the Buffalo Bills, if they should happen to get to plus 10, I believe that I will drop a wager on that as well. So now let's move on to our last segment and the fantasy picks for this week. Now, I haven't really gotten into the different types of fantasy games that exist, and the most popular one to play for money is called Daily Fantasy Sports. And this is something I used to do full-time. I don't anymore, but I still dabble in it. And if you're playing fantasy this week, these are kind of my picks to click. You can construct a roster out of these players and make them fit under whatever salary limitations you have. And let's just go through them quickly as I turn and look at the screen. Quarterback this week, there's only one I really like, and that's Drew Brees. He's got a home matchup against Tampa Bay, who has Jameis Winston suspended. It's going to be, they're going to get extra possessions. He's going to have extra chances to throw the ball. I really like him to put up a lot of yards. We'll see if he gets touchdowns, but that's my only quarterback this week. That's the only one I'm going to roll with this week. So on to the running back. Those of you that follow fantasy know that the Steelers running back, Le'Veon Bell, is holding out, and he's not playing this week, and he's a monster part of their offense. So his replacement, James Conner, is going to get probably a lot of touches, and he's very reasonably priced. So everybody's going to have him, and I'm going to have him too. But who do you put with him? I like Melvin Gordon. He's a consistent producer. He'll bring you touchdowns. He'll bring you yardage, receptions. He does it all. Very consistent. Let's hope he stays healthy. And this week, I like Kenyon Drake for the Miami. I feel like that could possibly be a bad weather game. There'd be a lot of rushing. He's had a couple of explosive games. It's kind of an iffy thing, but he's very reasonably priced. And he could be used if you need to save a few bucks in the running back position. On to the wide receivers. We got some studs here. Michael Thomas is the top receiver for the Saints, and I'm pairing him with Drew Brees for sure. And then you can fill in with another stud. You can go with Antonio Brown, who's considered the top receiver. I like A.J. Green. I mentioned before that I like the Bengals this week, and I think he'll have a big game. Chris Hogan is the number one receiver for Tom Brady with the Patriots. Marquise Goodwin is the number one receiver for Jimmy G and the San Francisco 49ers. And they have a tough matchup, but if they get behind, they're going to be throwing in the second half. And I like him to get some really good yardage. And then the value receiver of the week is Keelan Cole for the Jaguars. And, that I talked about that being a running game. But, Blake Bortles can throw. And I feel like they're going to open it up at some point to try to pull away from the Giants. And he's super cheap and a great play for you this week, I think. On to tight ends. I only have two choices. Everybody will pick Gronk, but I like Travis Kelce. He gets lots of touches. He gets lots of targets. He'll be one to keep an eye on. They usually go to him in the red zone. And Greg Olsen is great value pick there. Cam Newton, safety valve. And I think those are the only two choices you can really choose this weekend. And finally, for the defense, Miami is actually one of the cheapest defenses, and they're actually a decent defense. Playing at home, if the weather's spotty, that's going to help them even more to keep the score down. I feel like the potential for sacks are there. Mariota really hasn't. He has some flashes of brilliance, but I don't think he's really figured out the pro game. I think he can still be, a good above-average quarterback. I don't know if he's ever going to be a superstar, but great matchup for Miami this week. So that's it. That's our first show. I got it pretty close. We're 27 minutes in. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. It's been a long road to get to this day. And we're going to talk a lot about how to choose your bets, how much to bet, how to deal with winning streaks and losing streaks, how to look for value, how to look at the odds, what do the numbers mean, all these things, how to pick your games in fantasy sports, what's the best way to play fantasy sports and not pay a ton of rake. Those questions, you might not even know what they mean yet, but we're going to talk about all those things, and I'm going to help you learn, and hopefully I'm going to help you win money. So until we get to our next episode, I want you to, as I struggle to deal with the controls here, be sports confident and bet confident. And we will see you next time as I play the outro music. Thanks for watching. I'll be back next week. Cheers.